So, what is domain services for Windows? It is basically domain services for Windows. It's just a bunch of technologies that work together that emulate an Active Directory domain inside an edirectory tree. So it uses the protocols that AD uses and looks like an actual AD domain inside an edirectory tree. It's running on a Linux server, not a Windows server, and basically allows your users to have a workstation that's joined to the domain, just like in AD. Users can log in. They can use applications with DSFW. Users that can access their AD resources. So you could set up a cross-force trust, and if you already have an AD domain, you can with a trust access the resources in an existing AD environment. It seamlessly accesses to an OES service as well, so, like with the NSS and postfix file system. So you can just create shares on an NSS share or just on the POSIX file system. Some other things, group policies. It supports group policies. You can create them just like you would in AD with the Group Policy Management Console. It has a sysvol just like AD does, with where when you log in, workstations access that sysvol and grab their GPOs and determine what their user or workstation should be doing. You can have login scripts, just like in AD. They can be VB scripts or BAT scripts as well. There's roaming. You can have roaming profiles, and it supports Kerberos and the NTLM1 and NTLM2 authentication. And I'll talk about NTLM over LDAP, which seems to be really getting pushed by Microsoft more and more. We don't support that yet, but something that we will be supporting. But the GSS API and GSS SB and EGO, those are supported with DSFW. So we'll show you kind of what this will help you out with. So say you have an existing tree and you have a few different partitions out there, different locations, and you have an Active Directory tree, and sometimes you have mobile users that come from an edirectory environment and they need to access the AD environment. Well, with DSFW, you could set up a domain at this location and another domain here and another domain here. And basically that would entail putting a server, a DSFW server at this location, one here, and then one here. Once you have that set up, you can manage the users with your choice. If you're familiar with iManager or Console 1, you can continue to use that. Say the administrator at this location, that's what they prefer. You can also use MMC if that is preferred. So the file and print can be accessed just like it was with if it was in an AD environment. So you can set up a Windows member server. Basically, it joins to the domain and access the resources on that member server. And clientless access. So if you have a need for you don't want to have the Novell client, you just have it like a AD environment. You can do that without having the Novell client. If you don't want to have partitions, or say you have these as set up as partitions, but you don't want to have domains, you want simplicity in design and administration, you can have just one big domain. When DSFW first shipped, it just allowed one domain, one partition, but now multiple partitions can be part of a domain. So you could have just one huge domain if you'd like. So say we have an edirectory server from here, and he goes over to this Active Directory site and needs to be able to access that. This edirectory, just having in a single repository, be in this directory yet and still be able to access resources in this AD forest over here. And this can be accomplished through a cross-forest trust, just like you would with AD and setting up cross-forest trusts. Another big reason, probably the biggest, is using applications to access, for your existing users to access. Some of them require AD, and there's more and more we're seeing that. If they do, you could configure that application to go directly against a DSFW server. Some companies might not support that, might not be, if you tell them, I've got a DSFW domain, if you call in for support on some issue, they might say, what is that? We don't support that, sorry, we're not going to help you. If that is the case, you could get rid of it and instead set up an AD domain with basically all your users residing in edirectory / the DSFW domain, and because of the cross-forest trust, they will be able to access those applications. So that's another, and if there's a problem with the application being configured against a DSFW domain, this seems to always work as a viable option. So like, yeah, with specific like I said, some application vendors are very tight, and if you tell them that you're doing a different type of an AD domain, they will just tune you out. So that's an option for you. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of AD if you're not familiar with it, and how it relates to DSFW, what it translates into edirectory and DSFW. So we have a domain. Starting off with the domain. The domain is a security boundary in AD, and that security boundary translates to a partition, or now a partitions. You can, like I said, you can have multiple partitions within that domain. The domains they're all contained. Domains are contained inside a forest. That forest equals an edirectory tree. So you can't have multiple trees. Basically, AD has trees as well. That is not supported yet with DSFW, so right now it's just a forest equals an edirectory tree. An AD forest equals an edirectory tree. There's the transitive trusts, just like in AD, it says a shared secret between domains. That's how you can access between the different domains inside one forest, or if you have a cross-forest trust. The native security model, it's based on these shared secrets. So the domain controller, it's an authentication server. It is going to have all of the user's keys for that domain. So if a user needs to authenticate, they need to be able to access a domain controller. So if you only have one domain controller, you're putting everything into all your eggs in one basket for that with that authentication. So it's good to, to have a couple of them, and also for redundancy in case something were to happen, one server went down, or if they're over multiple locations, you might have a link go down. So domain controller is the only way that users can authenticate. So I've talked a little bit about it. You can have Kerberos, you can have NTLM, you can also use digest method. Users and groups, they are identified by a security ID, also called a SID. This is randomly created when a domain is created, when you install DSFW, this SID. There's an integer suffix or relative ID, which is called a RID. It's like a UID or GID in Linux, that is added for users, and this will be at the end of a user. So like a 501 is general. I think it's 501 is the administrator. So there's some of them that are hard-coded to be what they are, and your users will all have random ones generated when they are created or added into the domain. So member servers, these are not domain controllers. They do not have the user's keys, so therefore they cannot authenticate users, but therefore file system, applications, things like that. A domain controller is an authentication server. A group policy object is a GPO. That's how you tell a workstation, what it's supposed to be doing, what a user has access to, and also, just what login scripts, things like that get created. There's also a global catalog. DSFW has that as well, just like an AD, and that's basically like an LDAP access at the top of the tree for all of your domains, if you have multiple domains. Otherwise, LDAP just works per domain. So this will allow you to access all users and all domains, or whatever objects you're looking for, and if you have several domains. So DSFW, some of the features that it will provide you. So first one is it installs into an existing edirectory tree, so you don't really have to change much with your existing tree if you have one. You can have the domain boundaries. Like I said, they encompass multiple partitions. So if you have 3, 5, 10 partitions, you can decide if you want to have multiple domains, or if you just want to have one big domain, or if you don't need some of the users in one of the partitions. Part of the domain, you can exclude them as well. So this will help you in eliminating the number of, or reducing the number of domains, and with every domain, just like an AD, a domain controller can only be part of one domain. It's not like edirectory where you can have multiple partitions on a server. It's just one server, one domain. So your hardware needs can go up with the more domains that you have. So this will help with that as well. You'll have administrators created in each domain if you have multiple domains, so having just one single domain helps a lot with the administration. And it's also will provide more flexibility. Like I said, if you want to exclude a container from being part of the domain, you can do that. So I'll show you here. So this is basically what it was like before when it first came out. OS 2 SP1 and OS 2 SP2 is the first versions. And so say you had a partition here, here, and here, you would have had to have 3 different domains if you wanted all of them to be in the domain. Starting in SP3 on, so we're now in OS 11 SP1, we can basically make one big domain. The flexibility is, say you've got several. These are all different partitioned containers, and these two you don't want to be part of the domain or any domain. You'd like to have a separate domain. You can, if you wanted to have one big domain, you could do that as well, and leave those other ones out. So features. More, the name, it's not restricted to the container. It doesn't have to be the container name. That was when it first shipped. It did have to be that, but you can name it, your domain, whatever it is, or whatever you would like it to be. It can install multiple domain controllers. Recommended is up to 5 domain controllers per domain. The domain, basically, it's at this time it emulates a Windows 2003 AD domain. However, in the works is a 2008 domain with the 2008 schema and different encryption options that are in 2008. But that's something that's still in the works. So just like in AD, you have they call the FSMO roles, the flexible single master operator roles. DSFW has those same roles, and if you'd like, you can move them to different servers. However, some of them, like the schema master, doesn't really matter in DSFW. Schema and replication master is another role. Those are handled by edirectory, and just like edirectory, I mean, it's just who's ever the master or who's ever has a replica of root. That's how schema is dealt with. But it does emulate it for AD, so it looks, like just like AD would look. So, but really behind the scenes, it's edirectory. Fault tolerance, you can, with multiple domain controllers, allows if one server goes down, you have another one and it also helps balance the load between domain controllers, so that not one is taking all of the load as far as, especially with the FSMO roles. So you can distribute those across the different domain controllers. The authentication, you'll be able to support all the common authentication protocols, the main ones that domain uses. Also, being edirectory is behind the scenes. If you still need to use NCP authentication, that's also supported. So, and also there's a simplified install option that takes out a few screens, makes it just a little bit quicker. If you're not sure what you're doing they kind of automate it for you and pick where the specifically DNS is configured and how it is. So I'll show you where the difference between a regular and the simplified install is at. So the protocols, so the main ones that AD uses, like your RPC, SMB, and Kerberos, just like AD has all those protocols. Management tools, you can use iManager or MMC for your GPOs. You'll need to use the GPO management console. So there, with DSFW, the install is broken up into two pieces. And there's a YAST part, if you're familiar with SLES. Uses YAST to install products. That installs the RPMs and does some the original basic configuration. There's some more detail that happens to your tree as far as extending, creating some objects and modifying existing objects, things like that. Sometimes you can run into some problems in that part. So there's this provisioning wizard, and you can go through each step at a time. If you run into a problem, you can resolve it, that issue, and work on it till you get that piece resolved, and then go on to the next. And also, with the use of auto YAST, you can. And then you can also, in a script for the provisioning wizard, you can automate the install of DSFW if need be. So member servers that are currently supported is 2003 and 2008. However, I know that 2013 does work as a member server, and in the next version, it's something that will be supported. Sysvol replication. So you have a Sysvol and an AD domain. That's when workstations log in. They look for that Sysvol to get the GPO information. So it's critical that all domain controllers have that. That Sysvol is replicated to the other domain controllers, so it can provide that authentication as well, besides them just holding the keys for the users. There's password policies. If you're using a password policy, you can retain that existing password policy, or you can do password policies just like in AD. A lot of customers will just go ahead and either, if they don't have a password policy, will configure one, because there's more options that you can do with the edirectory password policies than with the GPO ones. Also, it is upgradable, and with OS 11 SB1, you can migrate to a new server if you need to. So we'll go over some of the deployment options here. That it comes down to, there's two types of deployment options. One's a brand new tree, and the other one is installing into an existing tree. So the brand new tree is, it's called a non-name mapped domain, meaning it's not mapped to any container. It's brand new tree, brand new domain, brand new everything. The second type, and it's usually the most common, as people already have edirectory installed, is we call it a name map, because you're mapping to a name or a specific container in your tree. If you're doing a name mapped install, the biggest thing that I see is the placement of the domain. Some people will create a new container and then set the domain at that container. The key to that, though, is that the users have to exist in the domain in order to be provisioned for DSFW, in order to work with, to appear as AD users. So know where you'd like it, which users need access, need to act like they're in a domain. That's the key to your placement. Probably the biggest thing to think about. Is for doing the install, we've got some TIDs, technical documents to look at, and the official DSFW documentation. I'd recommend reading through this. If you just need a cheat sheet on doing an install, this covers probably more than it really needs to, this TID right here, on preparing for a DSFW install, and just making sure that you've set up your tree the way it needs to be set up, and that it's organized and cleaned in such a manner that your install will go through just fine. There's also this helpful TIDs on DSFW. This is a list of TIDs. It's kind of a master TID. It has not all the DSFW TIDs, but several of the DSFW TIDs to help you with some common questions or some troubleshooting or some common issues or some of the latest issues that we've seen with DSFW. And this one here is when you install DSFW, or if you're wondering how it's performing, if it's doing okay, this is a good TID to get a basic idea of how the domain is doing. I've got some videos that you could also look at. If you just look up on YouTube DSFW Dude, I've got several different videos that I've done on installs and different configurations and troubleshooting some things as well. So that will help you with an install. So the feature enhancements to DSFW, I talked a little bit about some of them. One of them is a big one here, is the bidirectional cross-force trust. Right now, the trust is really just one way that AD will trust the DSFW, but DSFW doesn't completely trust AD. And a lot of that is really what it comes down to is the mapping of rights. There's a little bit of a way to get around it, but it's not really a full, complete method. And that's you can take your AD users, and if you have users in AD, you can take your AD users and put them, make them members of a group that's in your DSFW domain. But they will only have access to files on the DSFW domain. So if you have, say, like Novell CIFS or a Samba server or something like that, they won't be able to access files or anything like that on those servers. So that's where the restrictions come in. When there's a project called, I believe it's called NSS for AD, that is eventually they're being worked on. When that comes out, then we'll have full bidirectional trust capabilities. So right now it's somewhat limited. I talked a little bit about this, the NTLM over LDAP. This is becoming a much more popular protocol. It's not supported yet, but in the next version, the OES 11 SP2, it will be supported. When support, there will be a mechanism to automatically create it. You can do it at this time. It's very simple to do. This is a simple editing of a comp file, but it will be more standard with the next version. Sites and subnets, if you're not familiar with that, AD doesn't really have a way to provide for a preferred server to authenticate to. So say you have 2 locations and you have a domain controller at each location. Prior to sites and subnets, a user could, be at location A, but when they go to authenticate, hit the domain controller in location B, and vice versa. So there was no way to specify that, I'm a user at location A, I'd like to hit the domain controller in user A instead of going over the WAN. Microsoft had come up with sites and subnets that you can set up and basically say that, I'm at this site, I'm at this subnet, I'm going to hit this domain controller, I'm going to authenticate to this one or this group of domain controllers. That's something that's not been implemented yet, but the next version of DSFW will have sites and subnets, so you can, it's much more like AD in that respect, so you can say which server you'd like to authenticate to. 2008 domain support. I don't think it's going to be completely ready in the next version. It might be the version after that, but a lot of it is depending on this AES encryption that it comes with 2008 domains. So that's something they're working on to get that. But it will, when it does come out, we'll have 2008 schema and encryption. It is something that is being worked on. So backup and restore. So right now you can kind of manually do a lot of different things, but there's will be a tool. I'm not sure if it will be in the next version or not. It's still kind of up in the air, but we'll be working on a tool to back up and if you have a crash, that you can just restore everything onto another server and be right back up and running. Right now, DSFW, something happened to my slides here. I don't know, it's not showing the right slide, but it should say that they have Windows XP, Windows 7, and Windows 8. Right now, the Novell client is not officially supported with DSFW. It will be in the next version. However, it does work. We've had it got it working well with DSFW for quite a while. We've got some TIDs on how to do the different configurations. So if you want it to look like there is no Windows client, but still have authenticate to the domain and to edirectory, or if you want it to look like the Windows clients, you'll have that option. Mac support in the next version of DSFW, it will support Macs starting with 10.8 is when and from then on we'll be supporting Macs. We do have some workarounds. If you have 5 or 6 or even 7, the current version will work with it. I did do a video on how to kind of get around some of the things to make it work, some of the mappings that Apple has. We've now have a patch that adjusts that, and it's out there, but it's not. But the older versions aren't officially supported. Like I said, 10.8, we will be supporting that with DSFW. Third-party applications, we've got Citrix that with Citrix Zen Desktop and Zen Server and Zen App that work with DSFW. These are the different versions that, at least last time I looked, Citrix says that they are supporting with DSFW. Other applications we work a lot with, VMware. Citrix and VMware are, specifically VMware View, are probably the biggest reasons why, reasons why DSFW is implemented, and that they only work with a domain, and that we work well with both of these vendors. NetApp Filer is another one will work, and we've done. There's many more. Different SQLs, MS-SQL, and some other ones, but these are the ones that generally we've been able to have success in working with their support with their developers. So installing DSFW just go through some of the screenshots here of what it looks like. When you go to install, you bring up YAST, and you just select domain services for Windows, and don't uncheck anything else. I really wouldn't add anything either. You could do iManager if you wanted that, but I would just, at least at first, just do DSFW. It'll select what you need, then it will give you a warning that because usually Samba is already installed, it's going to be replacing these with OES Samba RPMs. So you just go ahead and click the do the following action here, and then say next. The configuration, when we get into the configuration screens, it starts right off with determining what kind of installer you're going to be doing. If you're setting up a brand new domain and a brand new forest, or if it's a new domain controller into an existing one or a new domain controller and a new domain, you have all the different options, as well as this Express option. And I'll show you where the Express option stops and where the regular one goes through, continues through. So it's pretty simple. It comes through and asks you about your NetBIOS name. You will need to have your domain name already configured beforehand in your etc host file. And if you follow the documentation or the TIDs I talked about earlier, it'll talk about this. But you can change the NetBIOS name. And next, you'll say if you're installing into an existing tree, which is the name mapped installed, or a new tree, which is the non-name mapped installed. So just put in your tree name. It's just like you're installing edirectory if you're familiar with that. And you select your server that you're going to and the user to log in to access that server. Then it'll prompt you for a password for administrator. And this is a critical one here. Where are you mapping it to? Since we're doing the name mapped install, you wouldn't have this screen if it was a non-name mapped installed, a brand new tree. It's a little bit different. This, we're mapping it to it. And then if we had Novell Kerberos, if we wanted to migrate that, we'd have that option. And if we have password policies already configured, we can retain those. And with these settings, what will happen, you'll get a little message saying that, just letting you know that this is where it's being mapped to. So, basically kind of, are you sure that's where you want it to be? And then just letting you know that you've selected the existing password policy. So if you don't have a password policy and you select that, your users aren't going to be able to log in. So it is, if you can always go back and create a password policy for those users. And then this would be the last screen that you would see if you did an Express install, just setting up time. If you have an internal NTP server or something like that, you can hit that. But after that, this is all non-Express install. So things like this usually just hit next on anyway, like the location for your DIB. If you have SLP, you can set that up here. You can always go back and do that later if you'd like. The methods, doesn't matter what you select here, it's going to install all of these anyway, so it can be skipped. And then it will automatically, the Express install will automatically create this proxy user, the OES proxy user, which is used for the install or for other products. You could use it for, which is the last product here, is DNS, that it does have to be installed on the server, at least at the time when you're configuring it. It's something that you want to at least leave configured. You might not use it if you already have an existing DNS, but definitely get it set up in a working order, and then once you do that, you could export the zone and import it onto your existing DNS server if you have an existing DNS server, and just shut down this. I wouldn't deconfigure it because sometimes you might need it for if you add another domain controller or something like that. It will be looking for this zone. So. And DNS is the way AD resolves everything. So this can be very tedious to handle if you're not good with DNS and don't know what you're doing. Just leave the DSFW server as your DNS server. Once you do that, there's this provisioning wizard. It'll go through and install and configure and get the basic part of the server installed and ready to go. Then we have this provisioning wizard. We have this option here to enable custom provisioning. This is adding multiple partitions to the domain if we need to do that. So we'll log in as both administrator and as the tree admin, and we would see all the different partitions that are directly underneath the container that we mapped our domain to. And so we could place a check mark there and say next. We will have to add a replica of that partition onto the server when we're done too. Then we just have the provisioning wizard. You can see it breaks down each task. So if we do run into a problem, we can, fix what is going on there. When it's done, that's it. Hit finish, and it's installed. And we can. I'll do a quick demonstration of some of the things that you can see with it. So if we look, got VNC set up here. Something also, if you're interested, I've got the site DSFW Dude. I said I started videos and anyway, long story about the name, but it's got a lot of different. Let me just pull this one up here. Information here, some helpful TIDs on DSFW if you wanted to do that. Let's see right here, takes us into like the prepare to install DSFW and to verify the install TID as well. So it's all right there. Plus there are some scripts, some for troubleshooting, some for just helping out on different things. If you want to, I've got a script for checking that edirectory and DSFW is healthy. It does a lot, actually more than what's in that TID, and you can automate some things with it. So let's switch over to let me slide that over. It's not going. So if we go click on, there it goes. Our this XP box I have right here. It's a little lower on memory than my Windows 7 one, so I'll bring that up so it's a little bit faster. So if we go in, so we've got some of the common Microsoft tools, the Group Policy Management Console. So you can see here, if we want to, we have our GPO, the default one. If we'd like to create another one, we could do that. Just right-click on wherever container we want to do it, and go ahead and create a new GPO, and we can specify and edit it just like it was, again, like an AD. So give you some ideas as far as this is the XP box, so it doesn't have some of the things that we have with Windows 7 now with GPOs, but those Windows 7 that you'll see if you're running the Group Policy Management Console from a Windows 7 box, it'll be just like it, like an AD, and you'll have all the different options with editing your GPO, just like in AD for Windows 7. For the users and computers, something I'd like to show you here. If we look at the domain, we can see if we go to like the properties. Hopefully it shows up well for you, that you can see that it's appearing as that the Microsoft tools show that it's preparing, or that it's a function level of a 2003, and that's the force level as well. It's a 2003 Windows Server, it looks like. If we look at the domain controller, and we look at the properties here, again, it thinks it's actually, Windows thinks it is a AD domain, yet if we look at the operating system information, we can see that it's a Linux enterprise server and gives us the Linux information, yet we're able to create users, do pretty much everything that we need to with a AD domain. It's not a complete replacement, but it does quite a bit of for most people, it seems to be more than enough. So if you'd like to create a user, just like well, using the same tools, you could create a user here, or you could use iManager like I talked about earlier, and make that user and they show up in the domain, and if you're using iManager or Console 1 or whatever, you'll be able to see this user, because it is DSFW is built on edirectory. Edirectory is the directory behind everything. DSFW really is just a way of taking all the AD protocols and binding them up and sending them on to edirectory. So you have all the edirectory replication, the edirectory processing, and the abilities with edirectory that behind the scenes, as well as having functions with AD. So if we go to, actually right here, something else to just show you. So I talked about just doing a quick health check, and got this script that you can run on an edirectory server or a DSFW server. It'll just change it to, adjust to whatever you're running. But if you run it after you do an install, you can run this and get an idea as far as how healthy your domain is. And I've got a few errors in here that we should hopefully see. You can see it kind of prints out the information as far as, give you an idea as far as what's on this server, where you're running it from. And it just goes through and does some of the common health check procedures. I've got it adjusted so if you'd like, you could do there's a few other options that you could add. I've had different requests, so I've added different features to it for different consultants. But this is just primarily the edirectory piece, and then it gets into the DSFW. So you can actually see the command that it's running. So if we got a schema sync error, it gives us an idea as far as what that is. And that kind of can be common because it's sometimes it takes a little while for a proper result to be returned. But we can see each command. If we had a problem, we could run that command and troubleshoot it. And then the end, it checks for your Kerberos, goes through your Kerberos files, greps through it, and pulls out some things that can cause problems that we see with logins to domain controllers. If you have this error, decrypt integrity check failed, for Kerberos errors, basically the KDC, a user's trying to log in, or a workstation is trying to log into the domain, and it has a bad password. You will see this in the KDC error. So got it marked as kind of a goldish yellow colors as a warning if it's between 10 and 100. And you can see that if it has a $sign, then that means it's a workstation, and that means your workstation. A workstation will set up an account, and it will set a password, and every 30 days, unless you change the setting on the workstation, it will reset its password. And sometimes there can be a problem with that, or if you've restored a workstation after it's changed its password or something along those lines, this will let you know that that's not able to log in. And if you get a lot of them, it'll be red, and that's definitely can be a problem and can slow down your domain because you have a lot of these failed authentications going in. Another one is this client not found, basically saying that this account does not exist. So I did it again without XP box, deleted the account. It does and had it running, and so it was just trying to search, and a workstation will try like every 3 seconds to log in, and so it'll be searching your domain, and this can cause slowness for your domain. So these are probably the two biggest reasons for a slowness in a domain. So it's kind of a demonstration as far as if you're already running DSFW, some things to look out for. And like I said, the script, it's right. Well, actually, let's pull this one up here. It's right. This here, DSFW help check. Like I said, I've got one for DNS as well. Or if you just want straight edirectory, there's one down here, NDSD help check. Anyway, if you're looking for videos, we've got some of the information right here. Also, documentation, common VMware ones that people use. So it's kind of a document repository for you. Documentation for OES and edirectory, and you quickly get to some of the information there, and then and also some cool solutions. If if you've written anything, let me know. I can put a link here and make it easy for other people to access. If you like, go down to the bottom. There's some links, like I said, to the YouTube page. If you'd like to learn some more, go through some videos on an install, or like the forums page. If you have some questions, you can go there. There's many developers that monitor that DSFW forum, and you can ask some questions on DSFW. But if you'd like, you can come in here and check out a few different videos. So that is all I've got. If you've got any questions, please, feel free to let me know.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Rance. And again, if you do have any questions, please put those through on the chat or the Q&A. So it looks like the first question that I'm seeing, will there be Windows 2008 R2 domains or 2012 domains?
Yeah. So I don't know about the 2012 one. For member servers, the next version of DSFW will support that as member servers. And the 2008 domain, I don't think it will be in the next version of DSFW. It might be the one after that, but it is something that is being worked on, the 2008 R2 domain. Like I said, a big piece of it is supporting AES encryption. They'd like to kind of roll it all out once. But it is something that will be. It is something that is being worked on. We should have it here, hopefully. Like I said, not this next version, but the version after that. I'm hoping it will be official. Any other questions, or?
Yeah, there are a couple more.
Okay.
Just one quick note for you, Rance.
There's the chat.
There was a question in the chat that asked to be answered using text. So if you could answer that when you get a second.
Okay.
But let's see, the next question. If your edirectory is primary but need DSFW for applications, do you have to manage users in 2 places?
No. So that's the beauty of it, is that it's edirectory users. I mean, it's edirectory behind the scenes. So to your edirectory servers, they just see the DSFW server as another edirectory server, a server with a replica of those objects. That's why it integrates well. It's running on top of edirectory. There's a single repository. It's common, even I've seen, for people with AD, or if they have AD and edirectory, to migrate users to save some money onto DSFW/edirectory, and so it makes a little simpler to manage as well. That you have a single repository for users to manage, so you don't have to do 2 different directories to manage. Like if you had, edirectory and AD, it's basically edirectory, AD in one with DSFW.
Okay.
If you'd like, if you'd like to access, like existing files, and so if you had, both your NCP clients and joined to a domain, so you're logging in NCP and SMB, you would be able to access your existing files. If you just went straight SMB, then you would just have to either install Novell CIFS. If it's NetWare servers, they already have it. You just have to have it configured, and via CIFS, the users will be able to access whatever files are there. But if you have the Novell client, you'll be able to do both of them. Like I said, it will be officially supported, although we have been helping people for quite a while to get the Novell client configured with DSFW.
Okay, and follow up to the question about the Windows 2008 R2 domain or 2012 domain. Do you have a time frame for those? As far as the domain, I don't have a definite time frame. I
I know it's not going to be in the next version. The next version is going to be released in probably, from what I've been told, about the end of this summer, beginning of fall time frame. It will be not in that version, but either a support pack or another version, probably the next version after that. So it might be another year or so. I can't say a specific time, but it's I don't know how they're going to release it, but it is something that they are working on, and I don't know if it's going to be an official like SP3 OES 11 SP3 release, or if it will be something with a support pack when they have that option. But that is something that my feeling is it's probably about a year away at least. So.
Okay, thanks. The next question, is it recommended to install by itself on its own SLES server, or can it be co-utilized?
So the server, it needs to be a bare bones server to install it. You can't have edirectory or anything on there. When you don't want to have anything configured for on that server, really, just very bare bones SLES server. Afterwards, you can install some other products. But however, it's just like an AD, it's recommended a domain controller only be a domain controller and really not perform other functions, just because it's being heavily utilized for authentications, and you just don't want anything to go wrong. If you look in the documentation, it has a list of OES, at least OES products that it's not recommended to install. I have talked to people that have installed, so like Groupwise is not supposed to be installed, or ZenWorks on the same server, but I have talked to people that have made that work, and it's not supported, and definitely not recommended. But other applications that come with OES, there are some that you can install it, but I would recommend installing having a separate server, just having the domain controller being a domain controller.
Okay, it looks like the next question, are Groupwise objects supported under a DSFW partition?
Yeah, so Groupwise will work with the users inside the partition. Like I said, Groupwise itself on the DSFW server is not supported, but I know of people that you can have at first, when it first came out, we were saying, no Groupwise objects inside the domain. After doing some testing, it's not a problem at all. So that's yeah. As far as having your users and all the Groupwise objects and everything like that inside the domain, that's not a problem.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. So I think this is a follow-up to a previous question.
Okay.
So it maps all your edirectory users to DSFW. Is that correct?
All the edirectory users inside the domain. They will have, and part of will happen during the provisioning wizard, and then afterwards, anytime you modify a user or create a user or what have you inside a user that's located inside the domain, that user will be provisioned or SAMified is another term we call it for the domain. So it's like SAM account name and supplemental credentials and some of these key AD attributes are added and populated on a user that's inside the domain, and you'll be able to tell the difference if you look at one.